Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Emmeline. Today's webinar is part of the Smart Nation Together series brought to you by Smart Nation Singapore. Our topic for today is creating a smart nation through user-centered design. Today, we are very glad to have with us Wilson from Reassemble to share more with us. Reassemble is a user experience research and design firm, and they have conducted seminars for organizations including NUS and MOH. If you have any questions for the speaker, do write to him using the Q&A feature, and our speaker will address them towards the end of the session. So now I'll hand over the time to Wilson. Wilson, please.
All right, thank you very much, Emmeline. Right, thanks to Smart Nation for hosting this event, and of course, thanks to all of you. Right, there's more than 80 of you here, right? So thanks to all of you for taking this lunchtime to come and listen to my little speech on creating a smart nation through user-centered design. Okay, hope you're enjoying your lunch right now. Okay, so yeah, right. So just a little bit on the agenda for today, right? I'll just introduce myself in a little bit more detail, and then we'll talk about the following parts, right? We'll talk about why is user-centered design important? Okay. Then we talk about what are the things that we aim for when we design a good user experience. Part 3, we'll talk about the mindset, right? What is it that makes a good user experience designer, right? What are the attitudes that will help us to design better products, whether digital or physical, it doesn't matter. Okay. And finally, we're going to look at one of the works that I've been working on for the last about 9 months now, right? So it's actually a launched website, right? And I can use that to show you how the design thinking process kind of works, right? And after that, of course, if you have any questions, feel free to address them. I think as Emily mentioned, right? So just write them in the Q&A, and the Smart Nation ladies, right, will help to direct them to my attention, right, for answering. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, hi, right, I'm Wilson. I'm a user experience designer. Okay, so yeah, I wasn't a designer from the very start. Actually, back after I graduated, I worked in London and Singapore for a couple of years each as a digital marketer, actually. So I was spending my time selling stuff, right? And I think in 2016, what happened was that I thought, actually, what if I devoted my efforts to making stuff that will be so good that people would buy it by themselves instead of me having to sell to them instead, right? And that's how I got started in user experience design, right? How do you make good products? So I did a course, I did some freelance work, right? And now I'm co-founder of Reassemble, a small UX consultancy that's based in Singapore. Okay, so yeah, we design websites and apps, all right? We also carry out workshops, right? Which is what we're doing right now, okay? And I'm also a mentor that helps young UX designers to get into the industry, right? I'm also currently an instructor at General Assembly, right? For the full-time UX immersive course. Okay. Yeah, so these are some of the clients that we've worked with before and some of the partners we have, right? Specifically, we'll be talking about the Institute of Policy Studies project that I've been doing for a while now. Okay, so that one will be for a little bit later. Okay, but before that, right, let us get into this thing, right? So when we talk about user experience design, or even when we talk about design in general, right, I think some people have very fixed ideas on what design is, right? Design is something that makes things look pretty. Design is about looks, right? It's about just, yeah, being nice, okay? Not necessarily a mandatory thing or a compulsory thing, okay? And what I'm trying to say here is, right, if we're going to build a smart nation, right, I think a lot of the successful moves that Singapore has carried out, right, towards making our country smarter, more livable, right, more efficient, faster, more convenient, all of that, right? A lot of that actually involves design decisions, right? Whether it's digital apps or even things that came before digital apps, right? I'll show you what I mean. Okay, so let's break it down first, right? We're talking about, oh, I'm a user experience designer. What does that mean? Okay, by user, right? Basically, I mean anybody. Okay, all of us are users at some point in our lives, right? We use tools to accomplish a purpose, right? So whether it's using an app to buy a ticket or using a hammer to hit a nail, right? We are users. Okay, we use the tool in order to get something done, right? And an experience, in turn, right, refers to when I'm using this tool, right? When I'm using a hammer, or using a screwdriver, or using an app, right? how do I feel? And what do I go through when I'm using the tool, right? Is it a smooth process? Was it easy, right? Did I feel good about myself? Or did I feel like I was very stupid because I don't know how to use things, right? It's surprisingly common how people think that, right? How frequently people think that. It's quite sad. Okay, so yeah, right, that's the experience that we're talking about. Okay, so if we put that together, all right, quite simple, right? My work as a user experience designer is when you give me a product, any kind of product, website, app, software, table, chair, right? I'll be there to think, can I make this something that's easier to use and more valuable and more comfortable, right? For someone to use the product, right? How do I make them feel better, think better? How do I make them use it in a more convenient way for themselves, right? That, in a nutshell, is user experience. Okay. And when you think about it like that, right, it becomes very clear, right? User experience is not just for digital products. We often talk about it for apps and websites, right? But it applies outside digital too. Okay. So let me give you an example. I spent about 5 years in London, right? And this is something that annoys me like crazy when I was in the UK. Okay, in the UK, the taps are designed like on the left. All right. So imagine the UK can be quite a cold country in winter, right? 5 degrees outside. So when I want to wash my hands at the toilet, I want to wash with warm water, right? Maybe like 30 degrees water, right? So my hands don't freeze. Okay. The problem is the UK doesn't have taps that give you 30-degree water. You cannot adjust the temperature, right? They have two taps. So I can either choose between using boiling water or I can choose between using freezing water, right? Either way, not great for my experience, right? So as a user, right, my experience is my hands are freezing, right? It's very painful. Okay, so this is not comfortable at all. Okay. Another example, okay, which this is in the Singaporean context. I think Singapore, one of the few countries in the world that builds public housing with this thing at the bottom, void decks, right? So why do we build void decks? Okay, and actually, it's a really good idea if you think about it, right? We are a country without much space, so we cannot just anyhow build more buildings to provide community space. So if that's the case, what can we do to provide space for the community without having to build more stuff, right? So the simple answer to that is we build on the first floor. So the first floor can be made empty, right? So if you have things like weddings, or funerals as well, like wakes, right? You can hold them downstairs. You don't need an extra footprint, but you can still do it in a shaded space, right? Especially important in Singapore, considering how hot our weather is, right? And even if it's not for social events, there's still a place that you can be at least under shade, right? So you are more comfortable when you're living in an HDB estate. Okay, so all these things tell us, right, whenever we try to build something intentionally, right, it's not whether it's a building, a tab, a website, an app, right? We are always designing stuff. Okay. So when we talk about smart nations, right? So a smart nation, as Singapore defines it, right, is a nation that uses technology, right, in order to transform how we work, how we live, right? And what I would say to that is, right, that's of course a very good goal. Okay, and how technology achieves that goal ultimately comes down to people, right? The technology is pointless unless you and I are using it as Singaporeans. So no matter how advanced the technology is, at some point it has to meet a user, right? The technology can be super advanced. People are often not super advanced, right? We have to take care of Mr. Tana Bing from Bishan. He might not be super tech savvy, he might not be super highly educated, but he still needs to use the app in order to do something. So where tech and people meet, right? Where you have the super advanced technology and then you have Mr. Tan on the other side. That's where we talk about design. Okay. Right. And of course, okay, because of course, because everything we build involves design and everything we build involves users. Okay. So the result of that is also that there's no such thing as no design. Right. Often, sometimes I hear people say, sometimes my clients, right, they will say something like, oh, we don't need to think about the design first. We can think about the design later. Right now, we don't need to design. We just build. Okay. And what I always tell them is there's no such thing as no design. When you choose not to design something, you are still carrying out the design. It's just that now you're doing it with your eyes closed, right? It's like once you get into the car and start the car, right? You are already driving the car. The only difference is whether you drive with your eyes open, in which case you can go in the correct direction, or you drive with your eyes closed, in which case something bad is going to happen to you, right? So there's only good or poor design. Okay. And why is this important? It's because technology, right? We think about technology as something that improves our lives, then of course it can, right? But technology never improves our lives without having some kind of a cost as well, right? Whenever we use something, right, no matter how advanced the technology is, right, there's always a bit of a bargain. So what do I mean, right? The technology or the app is here, okay, and of course it will provide some value to us. That's what we hope, right? More convenient, faster, don't need to go out, whatever it is, right? In exchange for that, however, users will have to do things. They have to think things, they have to remember stuff, they have to be able to understand what's going on before they can click on the right button in the app, right? If they click on the wrong button, they have to recover from the error, right? All these kinds of things, okay, can be classified as what we call cognitive load. How much are you making me think? How much are you making me remember, search, right? Find, okay? And the idea here is, okay, if a technology or product imposes a lot of cognitive load on us, if we have to think very hard in order to use something, all right, then as users, as people, we will naturally think, this thing is very leceh, I'm not going to use it, right? I might as well just do something else that's easier, okay? And when that happens, no matter how advanced the technology is, it will fail. Why? Because we are not using it. There are no users, okay? So yeah, right? So technology is always a bargain, right? In exchange for value, we will be spending time and thinking, okay? And that is the key cost-benefit analysis, right, when it comes to design, okay? Yeah, so really transformative technology, right, delivers great value at a small cost. It doesn't demand that we do a lot of these thinking, feeling, etc., right? We can do very simple things and get very big results. Okay, I think one good example of that is Google, right? What do you need to do in order to use Google? Nothing really. You just need to type. As long as you know English and you can type, then you can already use Google, right? You can, of course, you can think harder and ask the right questions. But even if you don't ask very good questions, Google will still return a lot of results to you, right? So in that case, it is a very good bargain, right? Even if I anyhow type, you will still give me a lot of results. You'll give me great value, right? That's how we know that something is a very powerful and useful technology, right? And the ability to do that really comes down to design. Design is how we minimize, okay, the non-monetary costs, right? How much time you have to think, we try to minimize that. How much effort do you have to put in? We try to minimize that, okay? And then we try to maximize the value that's given to you as well. Okay, I'll show you what I mean in more concrete terms later when we look at some of the successes that Singapore has had, for example, in creating a very simple little app, right? That doesn't seem very high tech, but has a lot of impact nonetheless. Okay, so far, right? So far we've talked about, right? Why is user-centered design so important in technology, right? It's because it's always a bargain. We want to make a better bargain in order to make a better product, okay? But how do we measure whether a bargain is good, right? A few ways, right? I would say that there's basically 3 ways, right? 3 things that we have to think about that are the basic goals of a good user experience, okay? So yeah, if you take away nothing from this lecture, right, try to take away these things, right? What makes a good product? What makes a good user experience, right? At basic level, 3 things, right? Firstly, useful. Of course, if I use a hammer, if the hammer breaks the moment I hit a nail, it's not useful at all. I'm not getting any nails hammered, right? So it must actually work. It provides value to me. Okay. Secondly, it must provide value to me in a way that is easy, right? Or in a way that is convenient for me. I don't have to do a lot in order to get that value, right? That's usable, okay? And then finally, right, we can talk about things like aesthetics. We can talk about things like attractiveness, right? So if this tool makes me feel good, it makes me feel in control, it makes me feel like I'm very kilat, right? To use the term, okay, when I'm using it, okay, that's how I know it's desirable. I would like to use it, okay? Yep, right. So usually I will go through this section by looking at apps, right? But recently I've been thinking, okay, let's not go through apps because apps can be quite complicated, right? The user goals when we talk about using an app can be quite complicated. So let's go with something that's very, very simple, right? All of us know how to do this, right? I think all of us are able to sit down, okay? Even if we cannot do other things, we can sit down, right? So, but even sitting down, right, it is possible to create chairs that are more or less in terms of good experience. Okay, so let me show you. The first thing, right, the first level of chair, right, is something like this. This is a level 0 chair, right? It's not usable, it's not desirable, it's not even useful. Okay, why? Because I cannot sit there, right? If you are quite a big size guy, I'm quite a big size guy, right? If I sit on it, it will only cover like half of my butt. I will slip off the chair, right? So would you even ever want to sit on the chair like this, right? No, right? Because it would be dangerous. I would not feel comfortable and restful at all when I'm sitting down on here. Okay, this chair is something that is completely unusable and therefore has a bad user experience. Okay, you don't even need to think too much about it, right? Okay, so now, if we were to say, okay, let's make something that's useful, right? Means you can really sit down on, right? You don't have to sit on the floor, right? You can sit on something instead. Okay, something very, very basic. Okay, let me show you. It could be something like this, right? So something like this, right? A stool, okay, is what we will call useful, right? It provides value. It means that I don't have to sit on the floor, right? It means that I can at least keep my butt on a flat surface, right? Good, comfortable. Okay. However, let me ask you, if you go into an office and they give you a stool and ask you to sit there for one whole workday, all right, what do you think will happen to you at the end of the workday? Okay, probably every part of your body will ache, right? You have leg pain, stomach pain, back pain, neck pain, right? Because it's a very bad position to sit in for a very long time. Okay, so a stool is useful in certain context, right? Let's say I'm just sitting for 5 minutes in order to talk to someone, right? Okay, that's fine. I can sit on it, right? It's a good place to sit down, but it's not necessarily very usable. If I sit too long, it becomes uncomfortable, right? I don't feel good about it. So how do we make something like this usable? Simple. Yeah, the back, right? So like the chair that I'm sitting on right now, like the chair that hopefully you guys are sitting on right now, okay? This one has a butt, has a back, right? So my whole body feels rested. Okay, I at least am able to sit in this chair for half a day, right? And I will not feel like every part of my body is hurting. Okay, this is useful and usable. Usually when we talk about when we talk about most apps and products, okay, this level is the level that we are all almost always aiming at, right? Only when we reach this level do we then think about how to make it desirable. Okay, and I'll show you what a desirable chair looks like. Okay, a desirable chair will look something like this. Okay, how do I know it's desirable? It's because this chair sells for about, I think the original one sells for about $12,000 per chair, right? And yet it is still one of the most classic designs. You know, a lot of, I mean, people with the money, right? They are quite happy to pay $12,000 in order to sit in this chair. Okay, not a small amount of money, yeah. Okay, so why is it that people will pay so much for this chair? Well, for one, it's definitely useful and usable, right? It makes you, it does look like a very comfortable chair to sit in. Okay, but at the same time, right, it incorporates other parts as well, right? It looks stylish. It has, it looks classy, right? It looks like if you put it inside your house, right, it will make you feel nicer about the whole house, right? It will fit with the decor. Your friends will say that, wow, Wilson is so cool. You have a chair that's so nice, right? It's very comfortable. Wow, right? Gives me a lot of face. Okay, so desirable, the level 3 of chairs often talks about these kinds of things, right? Does it make me feel good about myself? Does it make me feel good in the context of my entire life? Even when I'm not sitting down in the chair, right? I still feel good about it. Okay, that's what we hope to do when we create a really great app, right? And when you think about it, for example, I would say that if it comes to hardware, electronics, right? Probably the company that comes closest to this is Apple, right? So when Apple makes phones or computers, okay, even if you're not using the computer, right, having an Apple computer is still a statement, right? Holding your MacBook around is still a statement about who you are. Okay, that's how you know that something is desirable. Okay, so far we've been talking about chairs, right? You may be confused, right? So then what has this got to do with anything? Okay, let me show you an example of a successful transformative technology in Singapore. Okay, I take it that many of you drive or you know someone who drives, right? And if you drive or know someone who drives, then you're probably not no stranger to a parking coupon. Okay, but as we also know, right, can we make parking coupons better? Right, actually, yes, we can. right, you may have noticed that as a solution to the parking payment problem, coupons are actually not that great, right? There are some issues that are very obvious. Okay, firstly, you kind of have to predict how long you'll be away for, right, before you can set the coupons, right? If you put 3 hours worth of coupons, but you only go out for 1 hour, you waste 2 hours worth of money, right? But if you put too little, the auntie will come and catch you, right? So it's always a bit of a balancing act, right? Quite stressful. Second thing, right, it's very error prone. Okay, if I book the wrong the wrong tab in the coupon, right, the whole coupon is wasted, right? I can't use it anymore, right? Which is very, very aggravating, okay, because I actually paid money for that coupon, okay? And then also, it can take a while, right? If I'm sitting there, sometimes you see people that have to sit there, then they book, right? And you take a couple of minutes, right? Then you leave little bits of paper all around, okay? That's how it used to be, okay? So yes, right, as you can see, the old tickets, right, error prone, bit of a waste of paper, not very environmentally friendly, okay? It takes a long time and it's very hard to pre-plan, okay? So, right, so if I'm as a user experience designer, right, the question I would think is, okay, how can we solve these problems in order to provide value for people, right? People who are driving and trying to park cars, how can we make life easier for them, right? Can we make something that's faster, doesn't take as much time? Can we make something that they don't have to do pre-planning for, right? Can we make something that is not error prone, less likely to screw up and miss and waste money, right? So, of course, right, this is a question that GovTech has been tackling and they managed to answer, right? So they answered it a few years ago with parking.sg, right? An app that looks a little bit like this, right? And when you look at it, I mean, okay, this one, I don't know about desirable. Maybe it doesn't make a statement about you. Okay, but definitely I would say that it's useful and it's usable. Okay, useful because it does solve the problems that make parking coupons so annoying, right? You don't have to worry about whether you are staying for too long or not, right? You just extend the time, then they'll just deduct the money from you, right? But at least you're not wasting money. Okay, you're still paying for the parking that you had. Okay, you don't have to, it's less error prone, right? As long as you can find which car park you're at, right? It's very easy for you to just set the thing and then you can forget about it. Okay, you don't have to worry too much about it. So it's also quite usable, right? In the sense that, right, they have an automatic like mapping feature. So you don't have to manually search for the car park that you're at, right? They will tell you which car park you're at. Again, makes life easier for you. Okay. So when you combine all these things, you get something that's useful and usable, right? And here's the thing, right? It doesn't really involve super advanced technology, a database, right? And a good interface, that's good enough, right? As well as a payments portal, okay? And yet, right, I'm sure it has impacted the lives of literally millions of Singaporeans, right? Because millions of us drive, okay? And we can see the impact, right, just by looking, for example, at the number of downloads, right? In the few years since it has launched, right, it has gotten more than 500,000 downloads. This is just from Android. I'm sure iOS has more. So if iOS has 500K, Android 500K, that's 1 million Singaporeans are using it already. Okay, and the review score 4.2 out of 5. Okay? So you can imagine that, of course, as a tool, right, parking.sg has been a great success in order to provide value for drivers and making their lives easier. Okay, that is what we call transformative technology. Right, it doesn't have to be super complicated, right, but it's good for users. It's good for people. Okay. Okay, so far we've been talking about a lot of these things, right? Why and what we are aiming for. Okay, so how do we get it done, right? So okay, I put tools lah. Actually, tools is a bit of a misnomer here, right? There are of course a lot of tools that can help you to design a good experience, right? Some of these are design tools. Adobe, right? If you are familiar with Adobe, right, they have many tools that help you to design websites. There's this tool called Figma, Figma, right, that again you can use to design websites and apps. Okay, but honestly, I think that the key tools when it comes to being a good designer are not so much about your computer or about your ability to draw or whatever. It really comes down to your mindset. Okay, so I'm going to go through 4 simple points, right, to talk about what is the mindset of a good designer, of a good UX designer. Okay. The first one, right? This one sounds quite obvious, right? If I'm trying to solve problems for people, if I'm trying to solve the problems that you face, right? The very first thing is I have to care about the problems that you face, right? If I don't care, I will not even try to solve it. Okay, that's what we call empathy, right? We are trying to solve problems for others. We have to care about how others think, feel, and act. Okay, but I think it's more than empathy. It's also actionable empathy, right? So what does actionable mean? Sometimes we may find that other people have problems, but there might not be something that we can do about it, right? Or we may just rush into a solution and end up worsening the problem. Okay, so instead of just having empathy, we must also have the ability to analyze what we observe so that we can do something about it and know that we can do the correct thing about it. Okay, so yes, right, that's the first thing to start. You have to care, and then you have to be able to analyze. Secondly, right, and this one I think is quite a common issue that I've seen for a lot of our clients in Singapore, right? I think one way you can tell is people will say something like, we have designed this app, right? And we have designed this app, and users will do A, and then they will do B, followed by C, and then finally they will get D. Okay. And every time we get this kind of client, right, we will always ask them, how do you know that users will do A? I mean, what is will, right? Like, how do you know that they really will? Can you confirm they will or not, right? And often the answer to that comes down to, well, we hope that they will. We hope that people will be able to use the app in the correct way. We hope that people will be able to make use of this feature that we have. Okay. And here's the thing, in UX, right, when we are designing, we often do not design in that way, right? Because there's no point in designing for people who don't exist, right? We design for the world that actually is, and we design for imperfect humans, right? Humans like you and me, okay? Because let's face it, humans like you and me, we will not do things the correct way all the time, right? We are naturally quite forgetful. I think most of us are quite forgetful to a certain extent, right? Most of us are a little bit lazy, right? I mean, yeah, if can don't do, if can don't take the step, oh, then I don't take the step already, right? That's what we often think. That's completely normal, right? We seek the most efficient and easy way to do things. Okay, we take shortcuts if we can, right? So when you design for people who are a little bit forgetful, a little bit lazy, right? A little bit enjoy shortcuts, then you cannot expect that they will just abandon all these things when they use your app, right? You have to account for that. You have to say, okay, then even if the users are lazy, we can still provide value to them. That is what we're trying to do. Okay. So I think that's one thing, right? We design for the world that actually is. Okay. And the second part of this is, in order to design for the world that actually is, and in order to design for what users really do, this means that we have to go out and find out what users really do. All right. I have to actually go out with a friend and then watch them try to tear the tabs on the coupons, right? Then if they tear the wrong tab, and then you hear all the swear words coming out, that's when you know that it is really a problem that you can really solve, right? Because this person is very, very angry that they have made a mistake. Okay. So remember, right, when you are designing, okay, or when you are building anything really, right, whether it's a workflow, even if it's a workflow, for instance, okay, try to think about the evidence that you will need, right? Who do I need to check to see whether this design makes sense? Who do I need to check with to make sure that this software can actually help people, right? Then go and check with them. Find some evidence, right? Back up your designs or your decisions, right, with what is real, which is what people actually do. Okay. So yeah, design for what is real. Okay. Thirdly, right, this one, again, another thing that I've noticed, right, when I mean, I'm a Singaporean myself, so I also have this mentality sometimes. All right, we often have this saying that we like to say, right, especially if I'm a manager, right, which I am too. Okay, you'll say something like, hey, don't give me problems, just give me the solution, right? So, right, so I'm sure you people have heard this before. Okay. And I mean, in a sense, I see why people think that way, right? Because yeah, right, let's be solution oriented. I am also solution oriented. Okay. But at the same time, right, sometimes I think we are too focused on trying to figure out what the answer is without necessarily asking very good questions. Okay. So I think one of the key mindsets for good design, right, is embrace the fact that nobody has the answers. Okay. Often what happens, so just an example, right? Sometimes when people ask us to do design for them, right, and then we say that yes, we will go and ask some users to see what their preferences are. Their response to that is always often like, hey, why do you need to ask users? You are a professional UX designer, ma. You've been doing this for like 4 years, right? So why can't you just design according to what you know? Okay, and our answer to that is, well, we don't know. We don't know your users, right? I mean, I know what other people do in other contexts, but that's not necessarily the same as you, right? So instead of always relying on what do I know, right? I think a good designer, right, tries to ask, how can we find out, right? If I'm trying to design a website for, let's say, McDonald's, right? How do I find out what the problems are, right? Who should I ask? What can I ask them, right? Only when I do that, only when I embrace the uncertainty, I embrace the fact that I don't have the answers, okay? Only then can I really go and find out what the answers are, because I can go and ask people, hey, what are your problems? Then they can tell us, right? So often, okay, when we embrace uncertainty, we actually end up with greater certainty because we have decisions and answers that are backed by evidence. Okay. All right. And finally, right, I think be open to change and to innovation and iteration, right? The term iteration basically means that we make small tweaks to things, right, based on testing, right? So I will show you a little bit more about what I mean later. Okay. So yeah, right. But I think the key here also is that we must remember, right? No solution is permanent. Okay. Every 2-3 years, a new technology comes up, right? Every 2-3 years, people have different concerns, right? If you remember, 5 years ago, people rarely had concerns about personal data and personal information, right? Actually, about 5 to 8 years ago, right? That wasn't really a concern. But now, if you ask people, are you afraid of privacy issues? Most people will be quite worried, right? So because people change, the needs that they have will change. What they are worried about will also change, right? So we must always be ready to say that, oh, this solution may not work anymore. We have to go out and test again, and then we make some tweaks, okay? And I think one key example of that is something like this, for instance, right? If you go to new HDB estates, right? You compare HDB from 1980s in like, let's say, Ang Mo Kio with the 2010 HDBs in like Punggol, right? You will see that actually the environment is considerably different, right? It's because the needs of the residents have changed as well, right? Singaporeans born in the 1990s, they don't have the same needs as people who were born in the 1970s. Okay, so whereas last time was, car park has parking lots all the way to the top. Nowadays, car parks have rooftop gardens, right? Because people prefer greenery to having more parking space. Okay, so as things, so as times change and people change, right? HDB also changes with them, right? And the same thing should be true of any company, especially tech companies, because it's a lot easier to build an app than it is to rebuild an entire housing estate. Okay, so even HDB can do it, we have no excuse, right? We should be ready to change and be flexible, right? And meet people's needs, because that's what's always most important to us. Okay, so yeah, right. These are the four principles that I think will be good to share, right? Of course, you don't have to be a designer in order to embody these principles as well, right? I think a lot of people in Singapore, okay, even if you're not officially speaking a designer, right, you will often be called upon to do some kind of work that is like design, right? People will tell you something like, hey, a new team is being onboarded. Like, can you figure out how to onboard them? That's design, right? You have to think about what information do I give these people? What do they need from me in order to get the job done, right? Do I present it to them in a seminar? Do I present it to them online? Right? How do I present it to them? So as you make these decisions, all right, keeping these principles in mind will help you to make something that is a very good experience for the people that you're helping, right? Whether it's new colleagues, whether it's customers, right? Whoever it might be. Okay, so these things are not just restricted to UX designer's job, right? There are very general principles that you can follow. Okay, and with that, right, we are heading into the final part of this presentation, right? I will be talking about a little case study, right? So as I mentioned just now, right, we have over the last about 8 or 9 months, right, I've been working on this design, okay, for NUS, right? So actually, the Institute of Policy Studies is a school under LKY SPP, right? The Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy. Okay, so we had to design something for them, right? And I'll show you how we do it, okay, in a detailed way, right? And we'll also use that to introduce to you this thing called the design process, right? So what is the design process? Okay, I'll show you something like this. Okay, this is called the double diamond, all right? As you can see, obviously there's two diamonds, okay? So why is it called a double diamond? Well, because it has two diamonds and each diamond is focused on one particular thing, right? Remember the saying, don't give me problem, give me solution, right? Okay, double diamond deals with both problems and solution. Okay, the blue diamond, the first one, is about understanding the problem, right? Figuring out what the problem really is. Okay, then the orange. Then the orange diamond on the right, the second diamond, is about now that we've understood this problem, how do we solve it? What are the possible solutions? Okay, so each diamond is divided into two phases. As you can see, there's a dotted line, right? So there's discover, define, develop, deliver. Okay, and usually right, we go from the left to the right. Okay, sometimes if we find out there's issues here, we may have to go back, but generally speaking, it's left to right. Okay. Now, some of you may be asking, right, why diamond? Why must be double diamond? Why not double circle? Why not double square? Okay, besides the fact that they both start with D, right, there's actually a very good reason for this. If you notice, a diamond, how does it go from left to right, right? It starts from one point, then it goes wider, right, until the maximum, then it goes back narrow again, right? And that is actually what we do when we do design thinking, right, the design process. Okay, the stages that we talk about, the 4 stages, right, they either involve divergent thinking, which means that we start from one topic and we come up with many possible ideas, or they feature convergent thinking, which means we look at this whole list of ideas and then we try to figure out which one is the best one. Okay, so yeah, right, discover means that there's one topic, we try to find as many problems as we can. Ask 20 people, get 50 problems. Okay, then from the 50 problems, right, we try to mix them together. We say, from the 50 problems, which one is the most serious problem, or which is the problem that causes all the other problems, right? If we can get that, we have one well-defined problem. Okay, then from after that, again, one problem, we have many possible solutions, right? 20 different ways to do things. Out of the 20 ways, which one is the best one? Okay, so ultimately, what we managed to get is one well-defined problem and one good solution to that problem. That's the goal of a design process. Okay, and usually in the field, right, if you're talking about being a professional UX designer, it's never just 2 diamonds. It's like 2 diamonds times n number of times, right? Because we'll find one problem, we find another one, find another one, find another one, right? But that's usually how it goes. Okay, so let me show you in general what this how this thing works in practice. Okay, so yeah, in about August of 2021, right, Reassemble was approached by the Institute of Policy Studies, right? So we were part of a group of companies that they wanted to ask us, right? And they wanted us to design something for them, right? And what they really wanted us to design for is something like this. Okay, so basically they were trying to figure out, what do Singaporeans, people like you and me, right, what do we think Singapore will look like in 2030? Okay, and how can they find out about our opinions about certain major factors that will shape the future, right? So originally the idea was they will just get some professors to talk to the professors, but I think what they said was, you know, every time they talk to professors, right, the professors will come with a very educated viewpoint, but that's not necessarily the most relevant thing to them. Right? They want to find out about what you and I think. What does Mr. Tan think? Right? The average Singaporean guy or woman, right? So what we needed to do was to create something that would allow them to find out. Okay. So once we got that brief, right, we were like, okay lah, then we have to engage the public, right? And the number of people that the people that we are trying to aim is basically everyone, right? Whether you are young or old, male or female, whatever your race may be, okay, your opinion is important in terms of shaping the future, right? So we had to conduct a lot of research, right? We talked to academics, experts. We also talked to people from different fields, right? We conducted a lot of research. We got a lot of feedback on what are some of the important questions we need to ask. Okay, and then we collated everything, right? So I can show you something like this, right? So yeah, for Quest 2030, what we started with was what we call focus groups or workshops, right? So I think we had like 7 workshops, right, which had about 5 to 10 people each, and then we had a big conference which was about like 40 or 50 people, right? So all in all, there were like about 80 people coming in and out, right? And these people, their job was to tell us, right, what are some of the main questions we should be asking? What are some of the methods that we can use to engage the public, right? And so on and so forth. Okay. So yeah, right, here are some of the examples of focus groups, right? These are some of the participants, right? A couple of them are my teammates, okay? So we see them talking, okay? And then after that, right, this is just one small part of one small canvas, right? We filled up about 9 or 10 of these canvases, right? Each hexagon here is one question, okay? And the blue and pink are the possible outcomes in 2030, right? So so over about 1 month and 8 workshops, right? We gathered more than 100 plus questions. Okay, so 100 plus questions, 100 plus problems to try to figure out. Okay, and then from there, we started to think, right, what do we need to solve? Okay, we need to think about how do we make sure that the opinions from the public are honest and not biased, right? So we don't want to introduce bias into this. Okay, and then more importantly also, how do we make things engaging? I mean, imagine I come to you and say, hey, hi, can you help me answer this 150 question survey? Nobody is going to answer that survey, right? Please, you will run away. Okay, so we wanted to make things engaging and not boring. So based on that, right, we started to organize the research that we had, right? We had like so many questions, so much research, right? We had to organize it. Okay, we had to understand how users behave, what gets them engaged, right? So we had to go and ask more people. We had to work with the IPS professors in order to identify the most important questions to ask. But they basically told us like, hey, can we ask the people 25 questions? Then we're like, 25 is way too much, need to shrink. So we went from 100 plus questions, we shrank down to about 15 to 16 questions, right? And that was how we managed to make something that's a little bit more palatable and acceptable within a short time frame. Okay. So yeah, right. We worked with IPS. Okay, we confirmed the questions to ask, and then we figured that actually what we will need to do maybe is to gamify this process. Okay, we need to insert a little bit of fun. We want to get Singaporeans, right? People like you. Okay, so when you answer a question, you don't just get oh hi, thanks for your survey, bye, right? That's very boring. Okay, we want to get you immersed in a future, right? We want to get you to see what are some of the consequences when you make a choice? When you say something like, oh, I think climate change is not a problem, like what might happen in 10 years' time? Right? Or if you say, oh, climate change is a terrible problem, we must do something about it. What would happen in 10 years' time based on that decision? Okay. So in a sense, we were asking, how can we get Singaporeans to kind of create their own personal future Singapore? Right? That will be immersive. Okay. So we started drawing some initial wireframes, right? So these are called wireframes. So they are basically simple showings of what the screen would look like, right? So we have some headlines for newspapers, right? We thought like, oh, these are the important questions that we're going to ask, right? This is how we will show you. Okay, we maybe need some human characters to attract people to come and play, etc., etc. Right? So this is quite simple. Okay. So that was a problem that we want to solve, right? How do you make an interesting, interactive, game-like experience? Okay. Then from there, develop, right? Many ideas, come up with a lot of ideas, right? We try to visualize these ideas by drawing out the wireframes, like I said, like I showed you just now. Okay. We understand the constraints that we had as well. So what do I mean by constraints, right? One important constraint is like this. We are creating a serious game. And so we need to make sure that the data we collect is as unbiased as possible. In other words, we can't say something like, if you answer A, you get 10 points. If you answer B, you get 100 points. Okay, if I tell you that, what do you think you'll answer? You'll answer B lah. But you don't answer B because you actually believe in B, right? You answer B because you want to get 100 points. Okay, that means that we cannot do things like that. We cannot use points. We cannot use numbers, right? Because different numbers means that people will do things that are not honest, right? Or they are biased. Okay, yeah. So based on that, right, we had to constrain our development, right? Our ideas couldn't involve some of these elements. So what do we do? Okay, so our concept ultimately was to think about creating a day trip to the future, right? So in a sense, like I said, when you create that future, when you make your decisions in 2021, 2022, okay, you are creating a 2030 of your own. And then you can go into that 2030, all right? You can get some souvenirs from the future, all right? You can talk to people from the future, right? There will be we created 7 characters, and then they will tell you stories. They'll say like, hey, why you say climate change is not important, and wow, now my house all kind of flooded by flood water, right? So something like that will tell you what the consequences are, right? You could also see a map, and the locations will change along with the answers that you have, right? So yeah, so some places maybe so maybe economic development will speed up or slow down, right, as we become a more open or more closed society, right? And then that is going to affect different parts of Singapore differently as well. Okay, so this one, so this one is basically the work that we often think about when we think about design, right? So it includes something like this, right? Creating content. So I was the person in charge of creating this content. It took me about 2 months, right? This is just one small part. In the end, I think I created about 200-300 rows worth of this, right? As well as other things. Okay, it took me about 1 month-ish, right? And then we created it, and then we have to think like, oh, this story comes from you answering these questions in this way, right? Then you'll get to hear this story. Okay, you will unlock this piece of information, right? If you answer it in a different way, you will unlock another piece of information, a location of some sort. Okay, and so on and so forth. So it was quite a long process, a little bit painful, but very, very interesting as well. Okay, and then based on all of this, okay, we started to visualize what the solution will look like, right? So we started to have something like this. Okay. Okay, so yeah, right. How will we show you the future character, right? The character will tell you a story. Okay, how will we show you a souvenir from the future, right? We'll show you what the plastic barrels is. Then we'll have a little story about like, hey, how come future got so many plastic barrels? What's happening in 2030? Okay, oh, climate change. Everyone is using plastic barrels to store water because we are now rationing water. Okay, something like that. Okay, so yeah, right, by creating this, we can visualize, right? And then after we visualize, then comes the next part, is we can test, right? So how do I know this solution works? How do I know that this game is fun? Very simple. I go and take to real people, people like you and me, and then we go and test, all right? So we create the prototypes, we test it, and then we get feedback and iterate, right? So again, we refine. We know that the first draft is always going to be a little bit terrible one. People will tell us things like, hey, this one I cannot understand. Don't know what you're talking about. Very, very boring, very, very dark. Okay. So we carried out 3 rounds of testing over about February to April, right? We tested with stakeholders, including the professors themselves. Then we also tested with the public, right? We just asked our friends and our friends' friends, right? And then with their feedback, right, we changed a lot of things, right? Actually, this is just 2 examples. We literally changed the entire way the app looks. Okay, I'll show you later. Okay, so yeah, right. This is me testing with a friend, right? Yeah, she's just a friend of a friend, right? And she's like a young Singaporean. So I wanted to see like, oh, is this boring for her? Okay. And then so I will observe her playing, and then after that, I'll ask her some questions and get her feedback. Okay. And based on that, we basically changed like everything, right? As you can see, we stopped using hexagons, right? We started using squares instead because it was a little bit easier to see. Okay, we changed the entire color scheme because people were telling us, wow, why your screen so black? Makes me feel very grim, like the Singapore, the future is very dark like that, right? So we, okay, don't want to be dark, right? Then we change to something else. Okay, we changed the way the card looks. Okay, we also added this little thing here, right? Where you can see a summary of the world that you have created, right? The world is called generosity, right? The GDP is very high, for instance, equality is very high, okay, but openness is quite low. So maybe we are a little bit more insulated from the outside world, right? And all this is based on the choices that you make because you are the person who created this world. Okay, so if you want it to be more open, you can make other decisions and make the world more open. But if you make the world more open, it may end up becoming less equal, or it may end up becoming poorer, right? Or whatever the case may be. So yeah, right. These were some of the things that we came up with based on what people told us would be fun, right? Would be an engaging experience for them. Okay. So yeah, right. And ultimately all that work led up to about late June, late June, early July, right? We actually launched it. So you can actually go, okay, I'm going to start shamelessly plugging now. Okay. So you can actually go to quest2030.sg, right? And actually play this little interactive experience. Okay. So as you answer questions, you are creating a Singapore of your very own. Okay. And about 2,000, I think by now about 2,500 people have already done that, right? So if you would like to, feel free to go there. Okay. And play, right? So yeah. So this is how we will create from scratch, right, a website that allows you to solve this problem, right, of gathering feedback from Singaporeans regarding the future. Okay, and I would say that this process is relatively long because this website is a very big project. Okay, it's aimed at everyone, so we have to do a lot more research. Usually, if we're talking about a more focused group of users, right, like a single company or a single business with a very fixed, a very well-defined audience group, right? The process doesn't need to take 6 to 9 months. It often will take about more like 6 to 8 weeks in order to get done, right? It's just that in this case, because the institution is big and because the app is big, right, we have decided to do more, and that made it a longer process. Okay, so yeah, hopefully this gets you to understand a little bit more about how we work, all right, and how we actually do this process of designing something with a good user experience. Okay, so yes, okay, we've come to the end of the things that I'm introducing, right? So let's just have a recap, right? Just a brief recap. Okay, so yes, right, some questions, right? If you take away nothing from this lecture besides these 4 questions, right, that would be good. Okay, because hopefully you can then ask yourself, right, whenever you are called upon to do something that involves design, right, that involves thinking about how to help people, how to solve problems, right? These are some things that you can think about. Okay, so who should be the ultimate judge of user experience? Okay, it's already in the title, right? Users are the ultimate judge. Okay, and this is true whether you are a small company or whether you are literally the government of an entire country. Right? In fact, if you're the government, your responsibility is even more heavy because you have to serve everybody, right? So, so in Singapore, we are putting a lot of steps in order to reach communities that are maybe a little bit less tech savvy or a little bit less experienced in tech, right? And that's part of this as well. They are also users, right? Just because they are old doesn't mean they're not Singaporeans. We still do have to figure out what a good experience is for them, right? So that's who is the ultimate judge. Okay. So what are some criteria of a good user experience, right? We discussed 3, right? Useful, usable, desirable, right? It's valuable to me. It's easy for me to get the value. And then because of these 2, it makes me want to get that value, right? I feel good about getting that value. Okay, that's what makes it good. Right? What makes up a good design mindset? Right, I think 4 main points. Okay, empathy, right? We have to want to solve other people's problems. We have to want to understand what their problems really are, right? So we gather evidence, make sure that our decisions are based not on our own feelings, but on what we find out about other people, because they are the ones with the problem. So we must find out their problem, right? Only then can we help them. Iteration, openness, and flexibility, right? And readiness to go and ask questions, right? Be curious about understanding a problem and finding a good solution. Okay, then finally, what are the 4 phases of the UX design process? Okay, again, the double diamond, right? So we start by discovering. After we discover like 50 problems, we define into 1 or 2, right? Then we develop 10 or 20 or 30 ideas for solutions. Then we narrow down the 10 or 20 by testing until we find the 1 or 2 or 3 perfect solutions, right? Okay, not perfect lah. The 1 or 2 or 3 effective solutions, right? The ones that we know will work. Okay, and then of course, as things change, we must be ready to start discovering again, right? So this process will always go on, right? We're always converging, always diverging. Okay, so yes, right? And to end off, right, I would say this. Okay, so yeah, and I think this is one of the key things, right? Whether it's not just Smart Nation, right? It's a smart company as well, a smart business. Okay, a smart nation or business or company organization, it does not demand smartness from people, right? Because like we said just now, that would mean it's a bad bargain. If I'm demanding things from you, it's already a bad bargain. Rather, what we try to do is we try to provide value with smartness, right? You don't need to be smart or on the ball 100% of the time, okay? Because no human is, right? People are forgetful, like I said, right? We are forgetful, we do things differently sometimes, we're not super consistent all the time, right? That's just how it is to be human, okay? But if I can create something that will be valuable, even if you're forgetful, even if you're a bit lazy, that is what makes me smart. That's what makes a nation, an organization, or a business smart. Okay, and that, right? So, for example, just look at parking.sg. right? That's how you can have very real impact on the lives of a lot of people, right? More than 1 million people. Okay, so yes. Right, and with that, okay, yeah, thanks very much, right? If you would like to get in touch with me, please feel free, right? And at the same time, right, yeah, I think in the chat, Michelle has mentioned, right? So yes, right, please do give your feedback, right? So feel free to scan the QR code here, right? Or to go to the website, right? And then provide your feedback, right? So yeah, be honest. Again, like I said, right? If it's good, tell me it's good. I feel better about myself. If there were things you didn't understand, tell me also. I can figure out a way to make things better, right? That's what iteration is all about. Okay. So yes, now we've come to the end of my presentation, right? Thanks to all of you. And yeah, we can have some questions.
Yes. Thank you, Wilson, for your very enlightening talk. Yeah, I think that we do have a few questions in the Q&A box. So yeah, I think
I see them.
we have some time, so we can go through now. So I think one Pei Chin, she wanted to find out besides parking.sg, what in your view are other examples of ads that demonstrate good design? Yeah.
Yes.
So that was asking for your view. So I think it has to come from you.
Yeah. Yes. So I think wow, there's actually quite a few. I mean, I think okay, I think in Singapore's case, right, I think one of the websites that I really enjoy actually, and I never get tired of saying this, is the Ministry of Manpower website, MOM. All right. I like the MOM website because, okay, so like any ministry, right? I understand. Any ministry will have like literally 500 things that they want to put on their website, right? That's how any large organization works. And it can be very, I think then the design challenge is always, how do we prioritize, right? What is the thing that should go on top? What's the thing that should go below, right? And so on. And I think for MOM, what they have gone with is a very user-centered system in terms of prioritizing the information that they present. Because if you go to mom.gov.sg, you'll find out that front and center on the website are not like all the little bits of data information that they have. Rather, there's like, I think 4 to 8 main tasks, right? So they probably figured out that there are 4 to 8 main things that people come to the MOM website to do, whether it's maybe like looking for E-Pass, S-Pass, you know, complaining about your submitting a complaint about your employer, maybe like a violation of work rules, right? Checking up on the rules that are existent, right, to see whether what your rights are, right? So these are all very important things. But most importantly, they are important for the users. They are important for citizens and workers. Okay, so the fact that MOM decides to prioritize those key things that are important for users right up at the very top of its website, I think that in itself is a very good move, because it just means that the vast majority of users don't have to search around in order to find the things that they really need to do, right? Yeah. So so that's one example, right? Okay, if I were to give a bad example, a negative example, I think there was one country that created an app, right, that allows for its workers to submit claims for work, basically, right? So they work, right? I think part of the pay is subsidized by the government, so they can submit claims using that app. The problem was, this country, I'm not going to name it, right? This country, they're not an English-speaking country, but the app is in English, right? So you can imagine that when the normal citizen in that country they need to submit a claim to get money. This is money, this is very important stuff for their work. Okay, yeah. Then imagine if now I tell you that you can only submit your claims in Singapore in like Tagalog or something. It's completely a language you completely cannot use, right? So when you force people to have to use English, right, it just doesn't work. And that has, really had a very bad impact on a lot of people, especially poor people, because they're relying on these subsidies. Okay, so yeah, I think the key here is that, the key thing to think about here is when we talk about public service, right? Because you guys are not just serving a portion of people, you are serving everyone in the country. So when there are issues, they will impact everyone, right? So that's even more important.
Thanks, Wilson. Likewise, I'm going to shamelessly plug but I mean, this is my view. So I thought that one example of a solution that solved user problems was for me, SingPass. Yeah. Yes, and yeah, from what I understand, like the origin of SingPass was really to solve the user problem that people couldn't remember their passwords because you kind of had to have a new password every time you sign up for a digital government service, and that's why SingPass was born. It's really to enable a secure login without the need to remember passwords. So yeah, that's just from my view. Yes, and I think Wilson, we have more questions coming in.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I think there was one question on what are some of the key challenges, in the public sector when it comes to applying UX, and how can we overcome these challenges? Yeah, I have my views, but also wanted to hear from you first. Yes.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I think and I think some other people have also had questions that are a little bit similar, right? So like how do I bring this practice into an organization, right? So I think the one of the biggest challenge for public, especially for public service, right, is that okay, if a company says I don't care about 95% of the population because I'm only selling to the 5%, that's perfectly fine for a company, right? A government cannot say that, right? So literally, yeah, whether you are 8 years old or 80 years old, government still has to figure out a way to get you to use something, right? So I think one thing that leads to, of course, is that you tend to have you will tend to end up designing products that may not be aesthetically very pleasing. The reason for that is they need to be so functional that literally anyone can use it, right? So usefulness and usability become the key criteria here, rather than not necessarily desirability, right? It takes a bit of a backseat, right? So that's one issue. I think another issue, of course, is that, as with, and this is not just, I'm not like slacking off government specifically, right? Any large organization is like this. There are like 2,000 layers of approval. So by the time you get up to the rank of stakeholders that are important, then at any point someone might say that, oh, actually, I don't like this solution. Then he has to come back all the way down again, right? So any large organization faces this. And I think the key issue here is, how do we empower, right, certain people or certain teams, right, in order to carry out these kinds of, not necessarily a little bit more innovative initiatives, right? Like, oh, how do we go and ask people? Okay, I once actually had this is not government. I once actually had this company come to us and they were paying us, they wanted a project which was quite simple. They just wanted us to do a bunch of interviews for them. And they are a large company with like literally millions of customers, right? And we were like, oh, but can't you just ask your customers? And they said like, oh, we tried for 2 months. We couldn't find people to ask. So we desperately need your help. So I mean, okay, we take your money, we help you to do things, right? So we were like, okay, sure. And what we did was we basically just went through the database that they had. We identified a few people, right? Asked them, like created a short survey, send it to them, ask them to respond. Okay. And literally within about 2 weeks, we got about 25 to 30 users who were willing to sign up for the willing to come to an interview. And they were amazed by it. But I think what happened here is, like, basically, it's not that they cannot do this, it's that if they tried to pitch this to their manager, the manager will probably scold them. So maybe they didn't think about it that way, right? And that's why I think, I mean, in government's case, right, having GovTech, for instance, that's one way to say that, oh, within this organization, right, innovation is encouraged. We maybe don't have to worry so much about bureaucracy, right? And I think a lot of companies are also larger companies have innovation labs for that same reason as well, right? It's a little section that's a safe space for innovation, right? And that hopefully the innovation will then spread to the rest of the company or the organization. Yeah, so that's one way to overcome that.
Thanks. So I think for me, I think it's also about being very deliberate to have in our set really built in that whole process of gathering user feedback into your planning process when you are planning to launch a new product or service, because a lot of times we have to balance the constraints of timely delivery and making sure that we have interviewed enough users. So I think that's that element as well. Yeah. Okay, moving on to the questions. Yes, I think Waipun had a question on qualifications, like some of the key qualifications that are needed to become a UX designer. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So this can be a little bit complicated. In Singapore, as far as I know right now, there is no degree level qualification to be a UX designer. The highest kind of formally acknowledged qualifications are probably diplomas. I think some of the polys do offer diplomas in either human-computer interface, HCI, that's also like another term for UX design, or in actual experience design. Okay, so those are diplomas. Personally, I don't have either of those qualifications myself also, right? How I started off was I joined a course at General Assembly. So it's quite funny, like I was a student there, now I'm a teacher there, right? So I joined the course. It's a 12, at the time it was a 10-week course, and it was a full-time thing. So yeah, after that, I built up a portfolio, and I went to do some freelance work in order to build up my portfolio more. Okay. So I think this can be a positive or negative thing, right? I would say that sometimes this may mean that if two people call themselves UX designers, the skill sets may not be exactly the same, right? Because people are getting there in different ways. Okay, but at the same time, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing either. A lot of the times, UX is really about what you do and what your thinking is like, rather than what necessarily you know or don't know, right? Because none of us can know every user, right? It's more about whether you understand the process enough to carry it out in a way that is successful and effective. So, as a start, honestly, I think that like you say, like, you would like to join the career, right? And of course, that can be harder or easier. But, even in your daily life, whichever your career might be, okay, there are areas that you can apply the principles of design, right? So read up on that and apply those principles. Okay, that I would say that is better practice, for actually thinking and solving problems, right? Than than literally just saying like, oh, I went for 1 week course and I'm good at it. Yeah, practice is more important than theory in UX, really.
So like if I'm hearing from you correctly, there are two things that of course, one is you can go for courses on UX, and I think I've just shared some that are available for SkillsFuture credits.
Yes. Yeah.
But the other is really to build up your portfolio, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Would you have any tips for our audience in terms of how they can build up their portfolio? Because I think one of the challenges might be that they might not get the luxury of having real clients to solve real problems. So yeah, I'm not sure if you have any advice or tips on that.
Yeah, so actually one quite funny thing. So okay, when we first started Reassemble, right? A couple of months after we started the company, I think one of the things that we noticed was that at the time the new MRT trains with screens on the top above the doors, right, that was just being introduced. And by the time we had some practice already, so when we look at the screens, we're really like, wow, I don't like the screens, right? So literally what we did was, we didn't actually get in touch with SMRT for this, all right? But what we did was we said, okay, this is how we would do it, how we would redesign the SMRT screens, right? And we actually did some of the research, right? And we wrote out a blog post about it, right? And so on. So, yeah, that's kind of a lot of, for some people, they will do this completely on their own initiative, right? For other people, like let's say you join a course, like let's say the General Assembly course, right? This will become part of your syllabus as well. We are helping you to build your portfolio. Yeah, but really a lot of it comes down to your own initiative. Often, you may see that, even an app like let's say Spotify, maybe you use Spotify, you're like, hey, I don't like it. Not very useful for me. Okay, then how will you make it more useful, right? Who can you ask to see whether you can make it more useful? How will you test it? Right? Those are the questions that if you can do that, then you can create a process and solve a problem. Yeah.
Thanks for that. I think that's very helpful advice. Yeah. Yes. I think for those of you who are raising your hands, we'd like to invite you to type in your questions into the Q&A box. But meanwhile, I think we had another question, about the double diamond. So this person was asking if you have any advice, for people who want to really convince management of the importance of user research when, there's a time crunch, it seems. Yeah.
Yes. Oh my God. Okay. This is a difficult question. So even now, right? I'm aware. Even now, I think in Singapore's market, there is still this impression that research is expensive and takes a long time, right? And that discourages a lot of people. Okay, who will be like, if the app is coming out in 3 months, or we cannot keep researching now, right? We can't do things. So there's a few ways to do this. Right now, I think that one okay, so again, right, it comes down to two things. We either talk up the benefits or we decrease the cost, right? Because it's always a cost benefit analysis. So one way to decrease the cost is to explain that your user research does not need to be that time consuming and expensive, right? In fact, a lot of it comes down to, I think one good way of doing this that I found that sometimes works, right, is in a sense you are appealing, okay in a sense you are appealing to the ego of the stakeholders, right? But they also have very important insights. So what we have done sometimes is we'll say, okay, if you don't want us to do research on users, that's great. Let us find out from you first, what do you think are the problems that you need to that we will need to solve? Okay. The useful part of this is that when you start by including your senior management in the research, right? This means that they are already teaching you something. And in general, most people like to teach people something, right? So that kind of appeals to them. It gives them ownership of the project, right? And then maybe after that, you can say something like, well, some of the questions that you raise, we think it would be very useful to ask a couple of our customers about these questions. Okay, so in a sense, you are easing into the research, right? Like you're not outright telling them, hey, we need 20 people. Then they'll tell you, hey, 20 people very expensive, right? But if you tell them something like, oh, your questions are very interesting that you told us about, can we ask 5 people to see? They are much more inclined to say like, okay, you can ask 5 more, see how, right? And then from there, you can kind of, snowball. Okay, so that's one way. Then I think the other way is some people have tried this. It's a technique that has been used in other countries. It's this thing called lean UX. So how do we carry out lean UX is you may want to start from the prototype first. So you create like a basic solution, right? Whether it's on whichever tool that you're using, you create a basic solution, a wireframe. It can even be paper wireframe. Just draw rectangles on paper, right? And then once you have the paper wireframes ready, right, you just, instead of asking, I want to talk to 20 people to find out about their views, right? You can say something like, well, I want to test these screens that I've already drawn with 10 people that in order to find out whether it works for them, right? So the difference in this approach is because you've already done the work, right? That makes it a lot easier for the boss or the senior management to say like, okay then I mean the next step is just ask people there's nothing much we can do. You can just go and ask right? So it's easier for you to then say that, okay, we can approach some people, we get them to test. Then maybe while they are testing, we can ask additional questions, right? So what do you think would be better? What would be some features that you would like to see, right? Would you use an app like this, right? Those are the questions that you are really looking for. Okay, so that's where you can kind of sneak in some research into your process, right? And make sure that you have evidence backed for your decisions.
I mean, I think one other way is also to share with management that, the cost of not, just now I mentioned cost and benefit, right? I mean, I'm not sure whether one way would also be to share with them the cost of not having any user research, which is potentially you might launch a product that is, not usable lah. Yeah.
Oh, that's actually a good point. Yeah. Sorry, Michelle. Yeah. So I think there was one client that we worked with that actually said something like that. Basically, we designed the prototype for them, right? And then we said like, okay, we need to go out and test with people who are shoppers in your shopping mall. And they said like, oh, don't want lah. Why don't want? Then it's like the reason they didn't want it was because they were worried that if they showed the incomplete version, they would lose face. Right, which again, I mean, is an understandable concern, right? Then to that, our reply was a little bit like what Michelle is saying. It's like, if you are scared of losing face by showing an incomplete prototype, you see, if we show incomplete, we can at least tell people, okay, sorry, this is incomplete, but can you tell us what you think so we can improve, right? So what we told them was, if you are scared of losing face, imagine how much face you will lose if you just went ahead and launched a product and then people told you that your product was terrible. That is really losing face, right? Because by the time your product is already coded, that will be even worse. Yeah, so we managed to convince them to get us to test. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thanks very much, Wilson. Yeah. So I think we have covered most of the questions. So we have some time. So I think we have another 10 minutes. So again, a gentle call, for participants to fill in your feedback for us by either scanning the QR code or clicking on the link. But Wilson, if you don't mind, maybe because since we said that this webinar will run until 1:30, I guess we could stay online until 1:30 in case there are still people who want to type in their questions over the next 10 minutes.
Definitely, sure. Yeah, feel free to ask questions. Right. feel free to ask questions. Feel free to, if you want to get in touch with my email, right? You can take a look at these as well. Okay. Yeah. I think one of the attendees. Oh, there was one question. So this one, okay, maybe not. So I think someone asked something about like, how did MOM come to these design
Yeah.
decisions, right? So I think that one, I think what you mentioned was probably part of it, right? Well, I do know that they hired a design consultancy to help them with it, right? And I think they did work with the consultancy quite closely, right? So, but definitely the process by which a consultancy would do it, it would be roughly the same as well. Yeah, is that, so they will go out and ask users, right? In this case, they probably had to ask quite a few, okay, to get the feedback. What are the key things that they need to do, right? How would we know that they were good? Okay, and then, I think one thing you also mentioned is co-design practices, right? So that's actually a very good tip as well. I think some of you were talking about senior management, right? Like, how do you get senior management to agree to your design? What I find is that senior management tends to be much more willing to agree with your design if they were a part of your design, right? In other words, if you involve them in the workshop stage, right? If you ask them questions, get their opinions, okay, get them to draw some prototypes even, okay, they will get ownership of the idea, right? And when someone gets ownership, then psychologically they are more attached to it, right? They're more willing to support it. So I think one example of what we did for that was when we were consulting with INSEAD, for instance. So they are a business school. So INSEAD is a business school. Their campus is at One North, right? And I think one thing that they had was they had a lot of different silos, right? And very many different managers were not really willing or able to work together to deliver a solution, right? So our solution to that was, okay, let's get them all in, sit around the same table, then we throw the same question at them. The question is a student-related question, so all of them will be involved in this. Then we just tell them, okay, you write out the 3 concerns you have about the students from your point of view, right? And what we found out during that workshop. So the funny thing was this, right? They told us that before the workshop, they had been paralyzed for about 6 months because it was really people sending emails and not communicating with each other. Then over about 2 hours of the workshop, what we found out was that actually about most of the people, they had similar concerns about the students, right? Like, I'm not your enemy and you're not my rival. We are all concerned about the same thing. So now that we have this agreement that, there's actually 2 or 3 questions that really affect all of us, it becomes a lot easier to say, how can we solve these questions together? Right? We don't have to worry about, is it your problem or my problem? It's actually our problem, right? So so that is one way I think that a quick workshop can sometimes do a lot in order to align people and align the interests together and get them to cooperate much better when they are designing a solution.
Thanks for that. Yes, I think don't have any more questions already. Thank you again, Wilson, for your time. It's been very, very informative. And I mean, I would like to invite everybody audience. I think I myself, I'll go and check out the Quest 2030 website.
Yes, please.
To see what our future Singapore will look like in 2030. So I think in the meantime, we'll just keep this room open until maybe 1:30 so that anyone who wants to type in their questions can still do so. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. In that case, maybe I'll share some music then.
Yeah. Thanks, Susan.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hi. Okay. Yes, there were some questions, right? There are some new questions, which is why I'm going to answer them as well. Okay. So, yeah. Okay. For those who are asking how to get in touch with me, sorry. Okay, I shall do some more shameless plugging. Okay. So this is the shameless plugging here. Okay. I think someone asked, right? So for someone who has no experience in UX design, okay, how can we, is it worth the effort to take up a course in UX design? I would say that one thing, probably one thing to think about for you, right, would be that okay, the thing is this, right? For most people, by the time you've reached the 40s or 50s, right, that I've seen. Okay, I've seen people in the late 40s or early 50s as well, right, enter the field, okay, or take a course to enter the field. And then what usually happens for them is the successful ones, what they do is they find a way to incorporate the UX principles that they learned into their existing work. So for instance, one of them used to be a project manager, right? So as a project manager, what he does is he manages people, right? And by learning UX, I think what he got was a new understanding in terms of creating products with a new stakeholder, which is the users in mind, right? And what I found out later was that he didn't actually become a UX designer, right? I mean, he's already like 48 by that time, right? But what he did was he found a job as a product manager. So it's a project manager with a UX element to it as well. Yeah. So I'll say that, the thing about starting a little bit later is you have, of course, okay, there's always going to be a bit of disadvantage, right? Because technology wise, it may be a little bit harder, but you also have an advantage, which is your prior experience. And I will say, like, don't throw your prior experience away. If your work has UX elements in it, make use of those principles to supplement the experience you already have, right? It's not necessarily a way to change career entirely, but rather to do your current career better, or to enhance the skills that you're offering in your current career. Yeah. I think it's important because um actually a lot of roles involve UX lah. They are what we call design adjacent roles, right? So even if you're, let's say, a manager that manages designers or manages a product, okay, a lot of decisions you use are actually based on evidence, and whether you gather that evidence well, that will affect the quality of your work, right? But that's design. So there you go. Okay, yes, I can type out my